Welcome to Books in the World. I'm your host, Harris Thompson. Books in the World is produced by the Cape Cod Writers Center and the Cape Media Center. This center was established over 60 years ago and sponsors a 4-day writing conference every August on the Cape. This show has been broadcast continuously since 1978, making it the longest running show of its kind. Today, we're delighted to welcome Greg Skomal, author of Chasing Shadows, My Life Tracking the White Shark.
Great to be here, Hunter. Thank you.
I have a confession, which I haven't told you yet. I've spent the last 50 years trying to not think about sharks, especially white sharks. During the 90s, our girls were obsessed with Shark Week, and were always trying to get me to watch, and always declined. My stepson became a marine biologist, as you know, and the last 10 years he's been trying to show me the Sharktivity app, which I ignore. And I have to say, your book gave me a much deeper appreciation for the white shark.
Awesome.
And as you said, like the girth and grace. Every time you describe it, you're so, reverential or awestruck. And but also its efficiency, its evolution, its efficiency as an apex predator, and how discriminating it is, evidently. As it's hunting seals going along the coast with, the beaches clogged with swimmers and whatever. Yeah. And so in New England, our orientation to white sharks always seems to come back to Jaws, but you had a much different. It left a much different impression on you than it did on me and most others. Can you speak to that a little?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so here we are, the 50th anniversary of Jaws, the film, and I saw it in a movie theater when I was 13 years old, and it was frightening. I mean, I absolutely thought it was a scary movie. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I was fascinated by the shark, and also by one of the main characters, the marine biologist Matt Hooper, mm-hmm. in the film, played by Richard Dreyfuss. And I often conclude that perhaps the film pushed me into the water instead of pulled me out, because I decided at that early age that he had the coolest job in the world. And I wanted it. So the rest is history. And but the Jaws had a profound effect on me, personally, professionally, and I still love it.
And then after a series of fortuitous occurrences and your abiding passion and conviction, you ended up becoming your version of the Matt Hooper, right?
That's right.
Can you talk about some of the complexities of being both like a ambassador for sharks and trying to protect the public, but also, what else are you trying to do? You're balancing the public safety, and yeah.
So I at the time when I saw Jaws and decided I wanted to be a marine scientist, I'm thinking in terms of I really wanted to understand these animals. I wanted to conduct solid research so that we can produce information that would ultimately lead to conservation, sustainability, those kinds of things. I didn't think that aspect of Hooper in dealing with shark bites would be part of my job. And for most of my career, I would dismiss shark attack, shark bites, negative interactions, whatever we're going to call them, right? Because I was more focused on better understanding this animal. And besides, those events were extremely rare, very, very rare events. But as I began to study the great white shark, and had this opportunity right here in my backyard to do that. And then we did have a series of shark bites, one which was ultimately fatal in 2018. I realized that I could not avoid this topic. I had to take it on, head on. And although I didn't like it, I had to be realistic about it, The truth is there are not a lot of shark bites. Mm-hmm. But the truth is also that a single shark bite can have a profound effect, not only on the victim and his or her family, but on a community. And I saw that on Cape Cod, and I feel it. And so I'm balancing this desire to protect a species and at the same time protect people, because the species makes mistakes. Rarely, but it makes mistakes. And that has been a juggling act for me. And it's a learning experience, I think, each and every day I'm on this job.
And you start the book, it's very affecting first chapter. As much as you demystify the shark, you start with a Spielberg-esque, opening, with the first fatality, and you're going down the coast on the whales and shark cruise. partially or largely as a fundraiser, right?
Right.
To protect sharks for the Conservancy.
Yeah. Yep.
And then, you're working your way down the coast to the reported sharks that have been spotted by a plane or helicopter, right? And then the shark is coming up the coast, making its way up the coast toward the boogie borders.
Right.
And then, what was it like when you heard the news after just finding your sharks and sort of delivering the goods to your crowd?
The Sharks and Whales cruise is a fun cruise. It's people who are willing to pay good money to go see a white shark. These are real, what I call sharkophiles. They love sharks, and so it's high spirited, it's exciting, and when people see a great white shark, these folks are ecstatic. We're all smiles. We've put them on a white shark. It swims by the boat. Some are cheering, some are dead silent, staring in awe, some are crying. I mean, it's a beautiful experience for them. So I'm on this cruise, and we're having great success, and then I get a text. I'm getting texts repeatedly from the news media, and when that happens, I know something's up. And so I was getting phone calls. They weren't even texting, so I texted one back, and word was trickling in that there was a fatality just up the beach in Newcomb Hollow Beach in Wellfleet. And that really created a battle within my mind as to how to deal with that. I had literally hundreds of people on a boat who were so excited about white sharks, and had a white shark just kill a young man not that far away. And so that was a difficult moment for me. And I think it kind of, we opened the book with that, right. Because it kind of defines the role I'm in now, and then we work our way through the history of it. But it was a difficult moment for me, and I dealt with it as best I could. And I don't know if it was the best way possible, but I was honest with everybody on board, and we had a moment of silence. But it really threw a bucket of water, as you can imagine, on this wonderful day. And as I said, it changed the way I think as well.
And what was your line? Something about while we revere these apex predators, sometimes they make a mistake. Is that?
That's exactly it. Yeah. And we all revere and love these animals, but let's not forget. And that was the slap in the face for me.
Yeah.
Let's not forget that these animals are capable of killing people. And I learned at that moment I can't forget that either, and I don't. I think about it a lot.
Right.
And I talk about that in the book. How I dream sometimes about that, and how I weigh it in my mind each day that I'm out looking at a white shark, knowing that that's the same animal that could kill somebody. But again, rare, but it happens, and I can't walk away from that.
Yeah, it's interesting your role, trying to balance, giving accurate information to the public while not promoting hysteria.
Yeah.
And yet, the reporters often, take something and run with it because their job is to often, hysteria sells papers.
It does. Sharks sell, hysteria sells.
Yeah.
Terror sells.
Yeah. How do you walk that line?
It's difficult. I think I've gotten better at it over the years. I think being sensitive to this issue is important. Instead of being just a hardline scientist, purely objective, you got to get subjective, and that's what I do. I try to connect with people. The best thing I can do in my mind, and the Conservancy is excellent at this as well, is everything we learn about these animals, we share with the public. And when I don't know an answer, I say, I don't know. I'm sorry, but I don't know. And I'll look in other people's books and papers and talk to other scientists. And if they know, fine, I'll tell them what they know. But there's a lot of questions out there. And I think being brutally honest with the public is the first step.
I was at the YMCA swimming. I've switched from swimming at the Cape beaches to do my exercise in the pool. And at the end of my swim, this guy convinced me. He said, have you ever tried open ocean swimming? I'm like, well, I used to. And he goes, well, I swim at the West Ennis Beach, which is I can walk to. And we talked for about 20 minutes, and he finally convinced me. He said, the seals are down this way, they don't go this way. And so, well, I've got a seal right across from me in my lagoon, so anyway. But I said, okay. I got my head around it, and then I was listening to your audio book on audio tape on the way home, and it was the second chapter, which I found even more frightening. The New Jersey attack,
Yeah.
and it really is sort of Jaws-like because you've got the unsuspecting. You're describing the unsuspecting beachgoers,
Yep.
and then what's happening with the shark underwater, and so I'm still swimming in the pool, but
I don't tell many people this, but I have a pool.
and I like your mantra: don't go swimming around the white shark's food source, right?
Yeah,
Isn't
that's key.
Yeah.
If you see seals, we find that, in all the data we've collected on the presence of these animals, and we've done it now for at least 12 years in terms of monitoring when they arrive, when they leave, and where they spend their time. It's really associated with the highest densities of seals.
Right.
And so if you were to say there's a zone in Massachusetts where it's the risk is greatest, if you assume risk is proportional to the number of sharks, right, where they're feeding, right? So it's basically along the eastward-facing beaches of the Outer Cape.
Sure.
That's where the seals are, and so we really focus a lot on that area. That's not to say they don't go in other parts of the state, but they tend to be more transient.
Right.
When they move through other parts of the state.
So
There's
they're not hunting along the coast.
Right. They're basically hopping back on I-95.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And going up to another rest stop.
Oh, that makes me feel better.
And that's typically in the Gulf of Maine, or as far. People don't realize that some folks think they come to Cape Cod and stay here, and some do, but by far most of them continue north after they've gotten their meal, or perhaps they haven't successfully fed here. And they'll go as far north as the Gulf of St. Lawrence and Newfoundland, and then they'll trickle their way back south as things cool off.
Well, I shouldn't sensationalize your book because actually my favorite parts of the book are the opening chapters.
Yeah.
Where you're describing, an individual shark. It's almost as if we're going through the eyes of the shark, and
Yeah.
the descriptions are poetic and they're empathetic, and then you intersperse all sorts of interesting background stuff about how they operate and why.
Yeah.
I think it was one. It seemed like it was your favorite. Some of your favorite too was just.
Yeah,
it's just like you and the shark alone.
Yeah.
Without all the beachgoers and.
Yeah, I mean, we have the three major stanzas in the book, which is basically my development as a marine scientist, as well as the history of white shark research and shark research in general on the east coast of the U.S. But interspersed, we've got these chapters where we are the shark. You are learning about the biology of the animal through the eyes of the shark and what it's doing, and I can't say enough how wonderful it was to work with Rhett Talbot on this book, because that really was his brainchild. I can't take credit for him. I could feed him the information of what we know about the biology of the animal, but we chose to do a male and a female, and from birth to maturity and beyond. And so Rhett did a phenomenal job with that, and I can't say enough about having his partnership on this book, because honestly, I actually didn't want to write the book yet, and literary agent who visits Cape Cod quite a bit thought it was, a great idea to do this and I said, I just don't have the time, and she partnered me up with Rhett, and he made it happen. And he did a wonderful job, because what he got out of me is what the average person doesn't. He made me not only write like I would technically as a scientist, which can be really boring, but he had me dig deep into emotion. And when you write technical papers all the time, it's kind of hard to do that, and I can't say enough about him.
Well, the book's very personal, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's interesting how how the uncanny parallels between your career and the resurgence of white sharks
Yeah.
on the coast, and then then you're being you said a shy introvert that
Yes.
sort of ended up embracing this role, both because you enjoyed it, but also because it was necessary or important for
Yeah.
to help protect the sharks and the fundraising, which is crucial.
Yeah, very important.
Yeah.
Very important. I mean, I work for the Commonwealth of Mass. I've been with the Division of Marine Fisheries now 38 years. I love working for the agency because what we do is directly applicable to sustainable management. You know, our mission as a natural resource agency is to be good stewards of our resources here in Massachusetts. So I love that aspect of it. But sharks are really a fairly low priority option for the agency just because of all the other fires we need to put out. We've got some real issues with our fisheries and therefore, you know, fundraising becomes a critical component. So whether I'm writing a grant proposal or working closely with my colleagues at the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy, you know, getting out there and raising the money so we can do this kind of research is important, or we don't do it. Yeah, we can't do it.
That was interesting when you mentioned the naming of sharks, and at first I sort of winced a little bit from, you know, my son's always, you know, you can't anthropomorphize, you know, the sharks, and but then you've got some good and you had the same reaction.
Absolutely.
But they're good. You know, would explain some of the good reasons for it.
Yeah, I mean, as a classically trained fisheries biologist, I worked for the federal government for a few years while I was working on my master's. We tend not to want to look at the specimens, some of which are dead, that we're sampling, and a lot of my early work with sharks dealt with strictly dead sharks, dissecting them and trying to figure out piece together their biology from looking at their pieces, and they weren't pets, and so this concept of naming a fish is just really unheard of in fisheries science, and science in general, really.
Right.
But you know, so I was hesitant to do it. And it was really the Noshan shark that forced me in that direction. And that was, of course, in 2004 when Gretel, who we subsequently named Gretel,
yes.
you know, wandered into a salt pond on Noshan Island and the Elizabeth Islands, you know, southwest of Woods Hole, and spent 2 weeks. And that was really another eye-opening event for me, because I had long given up on studying white sharks in New England. I'd gone to Australia and saw white sharks. I've been to Guadalupe Island, Mexico, seen white sharks, but I gave up on it. I was studying every other shark species in New England and figuring white sharks was just not a species that was abundant enough. And then Gretel wandering into that salt pond and spending 2 weeks forced me to realize that we had a changing scenario here in Massachusetts and New England in general. And it was also the time we decided, okay, you know, give this animal a name. And it was interesting to me. It was also the first time I realized that perhaps public perception was shifting. Because the emails I was getting regarding Gretel, because I was doing a lot of media during that event, international, domestic, local, you know, national, you name it, were really aligned with please save that shark. Please save that shark. I had one person say, if you don't save the shark, we're not going to save you. And I'm like, oh, that's great, you know. A handful of kill that darn thing.
Right.
But most people were save that shark, and they were embracing it. So it kind of made sense that this shark would get a name.
Right.
You know, and then of course it became a great fundraising avenue as well.
Yeah.
And marine mammalogists know that. It works well for that. And that's helped support our research, Hunter. It really has.
Yeah, that was a great chapter. I love that.
Yeah.
And that was really a seminal moment for you.
He was.
A couple other seminal moments were the shark cages, and I've got it. I was just in Australia, as I told you, with my wife, and we were listening to your tape, and so the first shark cage that you construct, when you said, okay, well, you had to construct your own shark cage, and so yeah, just give me the weekend. I said, I've got some chicken wire, and my wife is like, chicken wire, really?
Yeah, a lot of people said that. So I had just moved to the state of Massachusetts and taken this job, stationed on Martha's Vineyard. I mean, how cool was that, right? And it was my first experience dealing also with production companies who wanted to do a TV show. And it was for ESPN, and they wanted a cage scene in a TV show that was highlighting at the time, the shark tournament that was on Martha's Vineyard. And so, sure, we'll do that. And I had to, figure out where I was going to buy all these parts. And I bought a bunch of angle aluminum and fencing material, which was like basically chicken wire. And in a 2-day period, we put this thing together. It had a door and everything, and it still sits on the vineyard in somebody's backyard. And we went out and we actually couldn't find any sharks. But it was my first experience dealing with shark cages, and of course I have had a lot more since then, which includes a scene in the book where I'm making a TV show for Shark Week. It was one of the first we were making based on the Cape Cod sharks. We were filming in 2010 to air in 2011. I was working with a production company of which I knew these individuals very well, and I trusted them. And that's really what it's all about when it comes to making Shark Week films or Shark Fest films for Nat Geo. And we were using a very old cage. As a matter of fact, one of the original cages for the film Blue Water White Death, which aired just prior to Jaws. And it was a documentary, so to speak, about white sharks, and one of the first of its kind. Make a long story short, we were in the water in the shark cage, and this cage is one of these very old cages that is somewhat brittle.
It sounded similar to the one you made.
This, actually, the one I made, I thought was much better, in hindsight, because this had wide spacing between aluminum bars, and you could do this with the bars, and I'm thinking, this isn't good. So this big female, 18-foot, 3,000 plus pound white shark is feeding on a dead whale, and I'm in a cage underneath this whale, watching this shark feed, and then the shark suddenly decides to come check us out, which is cool. We want that. Come closer, come closer. I got the camera. We're shooting away. And then it swings behind me and wanders up over the cage, and her tail wraps in a line. She decides she wants to eat one of the floats holding the cage up. Okay, I don't want that, number one. But then her tail wraps up in one of the lines securing the cage to the boat, and she feels trapped, and immediately starts pounding the cage from the top down. And the cage starts to break apart. And I've got a cameraman in the cage with me, and he's just filming away, which was absolutely amazing. He's filming this shark break apart the cage. The cage is coming down on his head, and I'm hunkered down underneath him going, I don't think this is good. This is not a good scenario. Shark freed itself, ultimately, and the whole experience was just, maybe 30 seconds. But another eye-opening moment in my life. Yeah, that's when you get to really understand the size and the power that comes with that size. If she didn't free herself, I was afraid of what might have happened.
And with the tagging in New England, you've spearheaded a lot of it. And where do we stand now? Can you describe all the different tracking methods we have in place right now?
And I walk through it historically in the book. I first started as a young shark scientist working for Jack Casey from the National Marine Fisheries Service. He had started the cooperative shark tagging program. And that program basically put little marker tags on sharks. And it's tagged over 300,000, which is fantastic. And much of the basic information about shark movements were coming from these conventional tags. And that's for the lack of other kinds of technologies. Now we fast forward several decades. He started doing that in the early 60s, and I talk about it. Now we fast forward, and we've got smaller batteries, we've got satellites in the air, we've got acoustic technology, we've got all kinds of sensors built into tags. And the tools available to us now are absolutely amazing. It's been a really cool time to be a scientist, because I'm kind of going from, a Model A Ford to a Corvette, over the course of my career. And so we first started using satellite link tags to get a better understanding of the broad scale movements of these animals in the three-dimensional space of the ocean and how that's related to the oceanography of the Atlantic. And so we were describing these really broad movements, which we found fascinating. We didn't think white sharks moved out into the open Atlantic. We thought they were mostly shelf-oriented, but several individuals moved out into the Atlantic, and when they're in the middle of the Atlantic, they dive to depths as great as 3,000 feet every day. which of course begs the question, why? And then we started focusing a little more closely at Cape Cod, and particularly after, the bites were happening and the fatal attack absolutely got us motivated to looking at fine scale behavior. So we started using acoustic technology by setting up an array of acoustic receivers. And those acoustic tags basically emit a very high frequency sound that's picked up by these acoustic receivers. So we can get a sense of when the sharks arrive in Massachusetts, where they spend their time, and when they leave. And so when I talk about, the towns of the South Shore not seeing a lot of white sharks versus the Outer Cape, it's because of this acoustic tagging technology. And we could really start to look at the seasonality and then compare that to the oceanography, water temperatures and those kinds of things. And then we graduated up to real fine scale stuff. That was telling us, what these sharks were doing on a daily basis. Now we wanted to know what they were doing, hour to hour, minute to minute, second to second. And to do that, we're using what's called acceleration data logging tags that are coupled with camera systems. So we can see what the shark is actually doing every second and recreate its movements in three-dimensional space. So the technologies have been really fun to use, and we're learning a lot about these animals.
And I know everyone keeps asking you this, and it's an impossible question to answer, but what would you estimate, how many would you estimate are around the Cape?
I've actually got an answer.
Oh, we do?
And thanks to my colleague, Megan Winton, who's currently at the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy as their chief scientist. As part of Megan's PhD program at the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth, School for Marine Science and Technology, she did a population estimate for Cape Cod for the years 2015 to 2018. So over that 4-year period, she estimated that 800 individual white sharks visited Cape Cod along the Outer Cape. So it's a very specific area and a very specific time period. But those densities are on par, if not greater, than what we see in other white shark hotspots around the world.
And as far as West Venice Beach?
We do have receivers, and we do not get a lot of detections in that area. And that's really all I can go on. So that's the beauty of the acoustic technology. If somebody has a question about a beach, and I work with virtually every town on the coast of Massachusetts, and they say to me, can I put out a receiver? And I say, yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks. This has been a great interview. I love hearing about all this. And do you have what's the best place for people to find more information from you?
Well, obviously, the shark program, my research is highlighted at the Division of Marine Fisheries website, in addition to the Division of Marine Fisheries social media pages. I also recommend folks go to the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy's website, which is atlanticwhiteshark.org. We put up a lot of our data there. The Sharktivity app is a free app where you can see where our sharks are going. And of course, the social media pages for the Conservancy give you updates on how our research is going at any given moment. And there's plenty of videos and photos. You can see actually what we do, and you can learn what we're learning.
Well, if you've enjoyed this video and would like to see more, you'll find links on our website, CapeCodWritersCenter.org, Facebook page, and YouTube. Thank you for watching Books in the World. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Hunter.